And the next team we're going to touch on, obviously, is the Minnesota Wild. And I know that there are some question marks and, that they're going to take a step back because of the cap situation that they're in with the Parise and Suter buyouts. They lost Cam Talbot this offseason. They lost Kevin Fiala. That was the biggest one, him going to the LA Kings. But this is still a very good hockey team, I think. You had some players there, like Ryan Hartman, for example, who just came out of nowhere, had a huge year. Like, talk about a regression candidate right there in Ryan Hartman, in my opinion. But a lot of good players coming into this lineup on really good value contracts, on cheap entry-level deals. You've got Matthew Boldy, who was just a stud when he first came in and actually helped Kevin Fiala's production last season. Marco Rossi expected to be on this team. Even a guy like Sam Steele, who they signed for just over $800K, I think, and is still a young forward and just needed a change of scenery. I think that could be really good as well. And they still have a solid back end. It's still all the same guys there. They re-upped with Jacob Middleton, who fit in really well there. John Merrill early on in the season. And Fleury and Gustafsson isn't a bad tandem at all. So I think Minnesota still going to be a good hockey team, still going to be a playoff team. And like we were saying with St. Louis, if they can just get in, that's all that matters. They could go on a big run. They've got the superstar winger and Kaprizov, obviously, as well. But I've got Minnesota just down a little bit in that fourth spot. Still like this team, just think there's going to be a slight step back, but I think they're going to have some guys on some cheap contracts that are going to really help them out during this kind of tough spot that they're in with the Parise and Suter buyouts. So I've got Minnesota in fourth. Just a thought on the Wild.
Yeah, kind of agree with you on most parts there, Harp. Definitely think that there's a little step back to be happened here. The thing that maybe scared me off of putting them at number 3 was I expect there to be some growing pains from October to December, and then this team's going to be really good in the later half of the year. I say growing pains because, like you said, maybe Boldy and Rossi and Sam Steele on a new team. Tyson Jost really only played since the trade deadline. Like, there's a lot of new faces in this forward core that I think it's going to take a little working out in the first couple months, and those are important points when it comes to playoffs and where you rank at the end of the year. I don't like the D-core as much as I have in the past. I think it's pretty simple for me to say that compared to what they've had before. And I expect this is the year we start seeing Flower decline. So I still think this team is good, and I still think they're a playoff team, and then anything can happen in there because they crash and bang. I just think that the growing pains early in the season, the lack of a real number 1C, a slightly worse D-core, and the decline of Flower all puts me at 4 for them.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. I don't think Fleury is like that great in the first place, and he's only getting older, so he's only bound to decline. So I agree with that. I also agree with Hartman likely going to regress because that season came out of nowhere last year too. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Harp. Losing Fiala, I mentioned that last episode in our hot takes episode, and I said, that's actually a good thing for Kirill Kaprizov if he can still put up the same numbers without his running mate and Kevin Fiala. That helps his case for the Hart Trophy, especially if he wills them into second or third in the division and they have a really good year. But I don't disagree with really the arguments that you guys are saying here about Minnesota being in the 4 spot. I originally had them in 2, but I guess I'm conceding here and they'll go down to the 4 spot. The only thing that maybe I'm a bit higher than you guys on for this team are the younger players who are coming in. Like Matthew Boldy, when he played last year, I think he had like I'd have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me. I think he had like 35 points in over like 45 games or something, and like it wouldn't shock me if he was just shy of a point per game this year if he plays with Kirill Kaprizov.
Totally forgot that he played that many games.
Yeah.
I thought he only played like 15 or something like that for some reason, but maybe I was thinking about how many goals he had, which was 15. I'm like not disagreeing about the young players on this team.
Yeah.
I think they're all very good. I'm just saying it's going to like the first 2 months. It's going to be some important points dropped. Was my point there?
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then a guy like Marco Rossi, like we haven't seen as much of him in the NHL. Like I don't think he's played over 10 games, right? Like he still has his. They didn't burn a year of his ELC, right? Because he was hurt, and so he still has a lot to prove. But I know that he is a fantastic prospect for this team, and he's hoping to make the team out of camp and go from there and see what happens. So I think there's going to be some sneaky good players on this team. And then, of course, like their third line with, guys like Marcus Foligno and Joel Eriksson-Ek is always good. And their depth there is good. They're hard to play against. They're fast. They hit. So, like, I think they're going to be good. I think they are going to take a slight step back. And, I don't think that's really a bad thing because they had an incredible year last year with 113 points, finishing 5th in the NHL. So I think to match that would be tough. And even in the second spot where I originally had them, I still don't think they would be getting 113 points just because I think this division is weak. Like you mentioned off air before we began, Harp, that this might be the weakest division now in the NHL. It might have overtaken the Pacific as the worst division.
Yeah, exactly. Chad, you mentioned Joel Eriksson-Ek. Wouldn't he be their number one center coming into this season?
I think it'd probably be Ryan Hartman.
He's in preseason and camp. He has not been playing with Kaprizov and Zuccarello.
Yeah, because I think what they want from him is a defensive role. Like I don't think they expect much. So and
that's a good point as well. Like he could be you could pick him as a dark horse for the Selke. Like he is a very good two-way center. Doesn't put up a ton of points. So yeah, that makes sense. But I look at him as a guy who could be their number one center. Just because, we were talking about Hartman regressing, but we'll see how it shakes out.
For team fit, I don't think it makes sense.
I think he probably will be eventually.
Yeah.
Like, I think he might be their best center, but for different reasons than, what you need a guy, or than what you need in a guy to play with Kaprizov for,
Right.
Well, I mean, fair, but possession matters so much with players like Kaprizov, and he can win some faceoffs.
True.
So I think you start him in the offensive zone a lot with those guys.
Yeah, and that's probably the case, and you'll see him on special teams as well to get possession and whatnot. But if you look at 5-on-5, like I'm sure his D zone starts are just crazy because that's what he does. He wins faceoffs and he plays solid defensively. But one thing I really didn't touch on was the goaltending on this team. I just think it's really funny that last season Cam Talbot was an all-star, right? And he had a great year. Pretty good year up until the All-Star break, and then he kind of regressed a bit. And the year before that, Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina. And we're not really talking about either of these guys because I don't think it would make that much of a difference. Like, goaltending is so weird, and I just don't know what to think of this tandem, to be honest. Like, it could be really good, it could be really bad, it could be average, and I really don't know. So I'm looking forward actually to kind of seeing how that shakes out and to see if they made the right decision, because Cam Talbot is going to be playing a heck of a lot of games in Ottawa, and we'll see which guy does better and if they made the right choice.
I just can't wait to see this. A little off topic, I know, but I just can't wait to see the way the Wild look in like 3 or 4 years, just with all of the prospects that they've been able to put into their system. Like, they're a competitive team right now, a playoff team. This will be a slight step back, like we've talked about. But man, like Billy Guerin has done a good job of stocking the cupboards at the same time. Another 2 first-rounders this year. We mentioned the goaltending. Jesper Wallstedt coming up. He's playing preseason games. So anyway, just kind of a side note, this team's going to look pretty good, I think, in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, the problem is you're not going to be able to sign anyone because they've got $14 million against the cap of dead money for the next decade.
Paying 2 guys playing on different teams $14 million.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're paying that to Parise, and in the meantime, he's making league minimum or whatever it is playing on the island.
Yeah.